The transport shuttle touched down on Nexus Prime Station with barely a whisper. Through the viewport, Dr. Jiwon Park watched as the massive structure came into view. The Interstellar Medical Academy stretched across 3 rings of the station, each one gleaming with the silver and blue lights that marked Galactic Union facilities. She had been here before, but the sight still impressed her. This was where the galaxy's best came to learn medicine. Jiwon grabbed her single bag and made her way through the docking corridor. Other passengers moved past her with barely a glance. Most were aliens, creatures of different shapes and sizes. A tall Dravik brushed by, its scaled skin reflecting the overhead lights. Several Chirik chittered to each other in their insect language. A crystalline Vel floated past, its body catching light like a prism. Jiwon was used to being one of the few humans in any room. Her species had only joined the Galactic Union 80 years ago. In galactic terms, that was practically yesterday. The Academy's main hall buzzed with activity. New students clustered in groups, their excitement obvious despite the language barriers. Jiwon noticed how they grouped by species. The Dravik students stood together, their posture proud and confident. The Torkin, a mammalian species with fur and expressive faces, chatted nervously among themselves. Even here, in a place meant for learning, old patterns held strong. "Dr. Park." The voice came from behind her, formal and cool. Jiwon turned to see Instructor Velquin, the senior Dravik who ran the surgical department. His scales were darker than most of his species, marked with age and experience. "You have arrived." Instructor Velquin. Jiwon bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect. "Thank you for having me back this semester." The Dravik's eyes, golden and sharp, studied her. "The administrator insists your contract be renewed. I am merely following orders." He paused, then added, "I still question the wisdom of placing a human in an instructor position." Jiwon had heard this before. She kept her expression neutral. "I understand your concerns, do you?" Velquin's tail swished behind him, a sign of agitation in his species. "Your people barely live 100 years. Most species here will see 3, 4, even 5 centuries. What wisdom can you possibly offer with such limited experience?" "I can only teach what I know," Jiwon replied calmly. "Whether that has value, the students will decide." Velquin made a sound that might have been a laugh or a dismissal. "The opening assembly begins in 1 hour. Do not be late." He walked away without waiting for a response. The assembly hall held over 200 students and perhaps 30 instructors. Jiwon took her place among the faculty, aware of the glances thrown her way. Some were curious. Most were doubtful. She was used to that too. Commander Thex, the station administrator, was a being of pure energy contained in a humanoid suit. Their voice resonated through the hall without need for amplification. "Welcome to another year at the Interstellar Medical Academy. Here you will learn to save lives across dozens of species. You will master technology that can heal wounds in seconds and cure diseases that once killed millions. You represent the future of galactic medicine." The students cheered. Jiwon remained quiet, watching. "Our instructors are the finest in the Union," Commander Thex continued. "Each brings decades, even centuries of experience." Their gaze swept across the faculty. "Though this year we have expanded our teaching staff to include new perspectives." Velquin stood. "Commander, if I may?" He did not wait for permission. "I wish to address a concern. For the first time, we have a human teaching advanced trauma surgery. While I respect the administrator's decision, I must question whether this is appropriate. Humans are a young species. Their medical technology was primitive until they joined us. Their bodies are fragile, their lifespans short. Can they truly guide students who will live far longer than any human instructor?" The hall went silent. Every eye turned to Jiwon. She stood slowly, keeping her movements calm and controlled. Years of military service had taught her how to handle hostility. "Instructor Velquin raises valid points," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "Humans are new to the Union. Our technology was behind yours. Our bodies are fragile compared to many species here." She paused. "But we survived. For thousands of years we survived without your technology, your medicine, your knowledge. We learned to heal with our hands, with plants, with whatever we could find. We learned because we had to. I am here to teach emergency field medicine. I am here to teach what to do when technology fails. When you have nothing but your knowledge and your hands. I hope none of you ever need these skills. But if you do, I will make sure you are ready." A few students whispered to each other. One Dravik in the front row hissed something in her own language. Jiwon understood it perfectly, though she pretended not to. The translation was not kind. "We shall see," Velquin said, sitting back down. "Actions speak louder than words, Dr. Park." "I agree," Jiwon replied, and sat down as well. The first class was held in Surgery Lab 3, a large room filled with synthetic tissue, holographic displays, and advanced medical equipment. 20 students filed in, their faces showing various degrees of interest and skepticism. Hyun, a young Torkin with soft brown fur, took a seat in the front. Behind her, a Dravik student named Kira lounged with obvious confidence. Jiwon stood at the front of the class, next to a table covered with what looked like primitive tools. Needles, thread, simple blades, cloth bandages. The students stared at the display with confusion. "Welcome to Advanced Trauma Surgery," Jiwon began. "Today we begin with the basics, suturing." A Chirik student raised one of its 4 arms. "Instructor, we have auto-suture devices. They close wounds in seconds with perfect precision." "Why would we need to learn this?" "Because auto-suture devices require power," Jiwon said simply. "They require specific conditions. They can malfunction. They can be destroyed." She picked up a needle and thread. "These cannot malfunction. They work anywhere, anytime, as long as you have steady hands and knowledge." Kira spoke up, her voice dripping with disdain. "With respect, Instructor, the Union has not seen a technology failure in a medical setting in over 50 years. Our systems have multiple redundancies. This seems like a waste of time." "I hope you are right," Jiwon said. She threaded the needle with practiced ease. "I truly do, but hope is not a strategy." She turned to the synthetic tissue sample. "Watch carefully. I will do this once, then you will practice." For the next hour, Jiwon demonstrated the art of suturing. Her hands moved with smooth precision, placing each stitch with care. She explained tension, spacing, the difference between internal and external sutures. Some students watched with genuine interest. Others whispered among themselves, clearly believing this was beneath them. When class ended, the students filed out. Jiwon heard their comments: waste of time, primitive nonsense. Why learn caveman medicine? Only Hyun lingered at the door, looking back at the table of simple tools. Then she too left. Jiwon cleaned up slowly, organizing her materials. She had expected this reaction. Changing minds took time. She had time. At least she hoped she did. Later that evening, Jiwon walked through the station's medical bay. The place was empty except for a Chirik orderly organizing supplies. Jiwon moved to several emergency lockers and quietly added items. Manual medical kits, simple tools, backup supplies that did not require power or computers. "Instructor Park?" The orderly approached, confused. "Those supplies are already logged in our digital inventory. Why add manual kits?" Jiwon closed the locker. "Hope for the best," she said quietly. "Prepare for the worst." The orderly chittered, a sound that might have been amusement or confusion. "The Union is safe, Instructor. We have not had a major emergency in decades." "Good," Jiwon replied. She moved to another locker, adding more supplies. "Let us hope it stays that way." But something in her expression, something in the way she carefully checked each kit, suggested she did not quite believe that hope was enough. 3 weeks passed quickly at the academy. Jiwon continued teaching her classes, and slowly, very slowly, some students began to pay attention. Hyun practiced her suturing every evening, her stitches getting neater with each attempt. Even Kira, despite her complaints, showed up to every class and took careful notes. But most students still saw the manual techniques as outdated curiosities, nothing more. The training exercise was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. All second-year students were required to participate. The simulation deck could recreate almost any environment, any emergency. It was considered the best test of a student's real abilities. Instructors took these exercises seriously. So did the students. Jiwon arrived at the observation deck early. Through the large windows, she could see the simulation floor below. It was currently empty, just a gray room waiting to be transformed. Soon it would become a disaster zone, complete with casualties, failing equipment, and time pressure. The exercise was famous for being nearly impossible. Students were meant to learn about triage, about making hard choices, about accepting that sometimes you could not save everyone. Velquin entered the observation deck, followed by other instructors. He nodded at Jiwon but said nothing. Their relationship had not improved much, but at least he no longer openly challenged her in front of students. That was something. The simulation is ready, announced the deck operator, a Vel whose crystalline form shimmered with concentration. Standard disaster protocol. Colony station debris impact. Multiple casualties. Equipment damage. Duration 2 hours. Commander Thex entered last. Begin when ready. Let us see what our students have learned. The simulation floor transformed. Suddenly there were walls, corridors, smoke, flashing emergency lights. Holographic casualties appeared, each one programmed to respond like a real patient. The level of detail was impressive. The students, wearing their medical training suits, materialized in the center of the chaos. Hyun was part of Team 7, along with Kira, a Chirik named Tick, and a Vel named Shine. They stood together, looking around at the disaster surrounding them. Casualties called out for help. Alarms blared. The simulation was designed to overwhelm the senses. Assessment first, Kira said, taking charge. She pulled out her medical scanner and pointed it at the nearest casualty. The device beeped and displayed information. This one has internal bleeding. Moderate. Auto-suture should handle it. Tick moved to another casualty, a simulated Torkin with visible injuries. Broken limbs here. Standard protocol, yes? The team began working with their standard equipment. Everything seemed to be going according to their training. In the observation deck, instructors watched and made notes. Then something changed. The lights flickered more than they should. One of Kira's readings suddenly showed error messages. Hyun's scanner went dark completely. In the observation deck, Velquin frowned. That should not be happening yet. The equipment failure is not scheduled until the 40-minute mark. The deck operator looked confused. I am not controlling that. The program is escalating on its own. On the floor, chaos increased. More casualties appeared. Medical equipment started failing across all teams. Students who had been working confidently suddenly found themselves with useless devices and mounting emergencies. Panic began to spread. This is not right, Velquin said, his tail swishing with agitation. We should stop the simulation. Wait. Commander Thex held up a hand. Let us observe a moment longer. Team 7 was struggling. Kira repeatedly tried her scanner, getting nothing but error messages. Tick attempted to use an auto-suture device, but it would not activate. Shine's medical kit had gone completely offline. They stood frozen, trained to use technology that was no longer working. A small sound cut through the chaos. A Torkin cub, one of the simulated casualties, was crying. The hologram was incredibly realistic, showing a child barely old enough to walk. Blood covered its fur. The cub reached out toward Hyun with tiny hands. Hyun knelt next to the cub, her scanner held uselessly in her hand. She kept pressing buttons, trying to make it work. The cub's crying grew weaker. The simulation was showing classic signs of shock and blood loss. We must move to other casualties, Kira said, her voice tight with stress. This one is too far gone. Triage protocols say we focus on those we can save. Hyun looked between the cub and her dead scanner. Her hands shook. But I cannot tell how bad it is. The scanner is not working. How do I know what to do? In the observation deck, Jiwon leaned forward. She had been quiet until now, watching carefully. She activated her communication link, the one that let instructors speak directly to students during exercises. Usually instructors stayed silent, but something in Hyun's desperate expression made Jiwon act. Hyun. Jiwon's voice was calm, cutting through the chaos. You have hands. Use them. Hyun looked up toward the observation window, her large eyes wide with confusion. You do not need a scanner to find a wound. Jiwon continued, her voice steady and clear. Look at the cub. Where is the blood coming from? Use your eyes. Use your hands. Find the source. Several other instructors turned to stare at Jiwon. Velquin opened his mouth as if to object, but Commander Thex raised a hand for silence. Let her continue. On the floor, Hyun slowly put down her scanner. She looked at the cub, really looked. Blood was pooling from somewhere on the left side. She gently moved the cub's arm. There, a large gash across the ribs. I found it, Hyun said into her calm. Good, Jiwon replied. Now what stops bleeding? Pressure, Hyun said, remembering the lessons from 3 weeks ago. The lessons most students had dismissed as primitive. Then apply pressure. Use cloth, use your hands, use whatever you have. Stop the bleeding first. Everything else comes after. Hyun tore a strip from her training suit and pressed it firmly against the wound. The cub's crying changed pitch, no longer weakening. The blood flow slowed. Kira had been watching. Instructor Park? Can you help us too? I can, Jiwan said. But first tell me what you see with your own eyes. Forget the scanners. Forget the auto-suture. What do you see? Kira turned to look at the casualties around her. Really look, without depending on her device to tell her what was wrong. That one is breathing fast and shallow. Chest injury, maybe. Check manually. Feel for broken ribs. Gently. Kira's hands shook as she did what humans had done for thousands of years. She felt. She examined. She used her own senses instead of technology. Yes, broken ribs. One might be puncturing the lung. Seal it, G1 said. You learned occlusive dressings. Manual ones. Use what you know. Team 7 began to function again. Slowly, nervously, they applied the techniques G1 had taught. Techniques they had thought were useless. Tick used strips of metal and cloth to splint broken bones. Shine learned to assess breathing by counting and watching chest movement. Hyun kept pressure on wounds and learned to tie field dressings. Other teams were not doing as well. They stood around their failed equipment, arguing about protocols, waiting for someone to fix the technology. Their casualty counts climbed. The 2-hour simulation ended with alarms. The disaster zone faded back to the gray room. Students stood among the disappeared casualties, breathing hard, covered in holographic blood that slowly vanished. The statistics appeared on screens throughout the observation deck. Team 7 had the highest survival rate of any team. By a significant margin, Velquin stared at the numbers in silence. Other instructors murmured among themselves. Commander Thex made a note on their personal display. In the debriefing room, students gathered to discuss the exercise. Most were shaken by the equipment failures. Some complained that the simulation had been unfair. Real emergencies do not care about fair, Velquin said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. He looked at Team 7. You performed well. Exceptionally well, how? Hyun glanced at Kira, then spoke up. Instructor Park taught us to work without technology. We thought it was pointless, but today it saved lives, even simulated ones. Luck, a Dravik student from another team muttered. The simulation was glitched. In real situations, our equipment works perfectly. Kira surprisingly shook her head. Maybe, but what if it does not? What if there is an EMP? What if we are somewhere remote? What if the power fails? She looked at her hands, still slightly trembling. Today I learned I was helpless without my scanner. That is unacceptable. I am supposed to be a doctor. Velquin watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. Finally he spoke. The simulation was not glitched. It was reprogrammed. By me. Silence filled the room. I wanted to prove that Dr. Park's methods were unnecessary. He continued, his voice heavy. I designed an exercise where technology would fail completely. I expected all teams to struggle equally. I expected it to show that without proper equipment, even basic medicine is impossible. He paused. I was wrong. Jiwon, who had been standing at the back of the room, said nothing. Dr. Park, Velquin turned to face her. I owe you an apology. Your methods are not primitive. They are foundational. I had forgotten that. There is nothing to forgive, Jiwon replied calmly. You wanted the best for your students. So do I. We just had different ideas about how to achieve that. Students began talking among themselves, their voices excited now instead of dismissive. Several approached Jiwon after the debriefing ended. Instructor, can we schedule extra practice time? Will you teach us more manual techniques? I want to learn everything you know. Jiwon smiled, a small, genuine smile. Of course. My office hours are posted. Come by any time. As students filed out, Hyun lingered. Instructor Park? Thank you. That cub, even though it was a simulation, I felt like I really helped. I have never felt that before. Usually I just watch machines do the work. You did help, Jiwon said. You used your knowledge, your judgment, your hands. That is real medicine. The technology should serve you, not the other way around. Hyun nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. I want to learn more. I want to be the kind of doctor who can help anyone, anywhere, with anything. Then you will be, Jiwon replied. I will make sure of it. That night, Jiwon sat in her small instructor quarters, updating her lesson plans. Tomorrow she would teach wound assessment without scanners. Next week, manual vital sign monitoring. The week after that, improvised surgical tools. There was so much to teach, and now students were ready to learn. Her comm device chimed. A message from Velquin appeared. It was Bree.